Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Today's topic is all about the new General Data Protection Regulation. I'm Brendan Pugh. I'll be presenting this topic today. I'm the COO for Vaimo, and I'm the lucky or maybe the unlucky one who drew the straw to be the program manager for GDPR inside Vaimo. I'm joined today by some of my other Vaimo colleagues, Wilco, our CTO, and Paul, who's part of our legal team here at Vaimo, and Fred, who is our security officer, and David, our CEO. So I've asked them to join me in case there is something that comes up that might need their input. And also towards the end, if we've got time for questions and answers, if I get stuck, then they are more than welcome to jump in and help out if there's time for some questions towards the end. So this team that I've just been presenting has been working very hard in the background during the last 8 to 12 months to help Vaimo and Vaimo clients navigate through this contentious topic, which is GDPR, and to help Vaimo and Vaimo's clients prepare for GDPR. So basically during the last 8 to 12 months, our team here at Vaimo has gone through a process where we have reviewed all our security policies and where we have implemented some changes to our security policies. We've also reviewed our processes in and around data processing. We also looked at our data processing agreements and all our tools and systems that's being used, all with the aim to be GDPR compliant. So we'll share a bit of what we've learned during these last 8 to 12 months with you today, and hopefully you find that helpful and insightful. What I would just like to ask you is to, of course, mute yourself during this webinar so that we don't get undisturbed background noise. And also, this is a very big topic. There's a lot of information that we will try and squeeze into the next hour. Quite a lot of complex topics. We are recording this, so if I go a bit fast, don't worry, you'll be able to get the slides and you'll be able to get a recording afterwards. So I will be trying to squeeze in quite a lot in a very short space of time. Okay, so I am sure that you all agree that this is a very hot topic, the topic called GDPR. And what we hear and see in the market, if we look around and speak to our customers and to some of our suppliers, and also when we look at some surveys, is that there is a robust awareness around GDPR, and business leaders know they need to comply. So awareness is not a problem around GDPR. But if we dig a little bit deeper and we go into some of the, as we say, the devil is in the detail, we can see that businesses are not prepared or as prepared or secure as they believe themselves to be. So our view is that a large percentage of European companies are not ready today for GDPR and will most likely not be 100% ready and compliant by 25th of May. And the reason for most companies not being ready by 25th of May is because there is a lot of uncertainty around this topic, and a lot of the much of the official guidance on key issues has not yet been published. So basically, what we are saying here is that we believe that the delays and the uncertainty around GDPR is caused because GDPR is a principle-led legislation which tell companies what to do, but not necessarily how to do it. And the fact that it doesn't tell us how to do it will obviously result in various opinions and views on how serious you should take this and what type of changes you should make, how much you should invest into it. So yes, there are many different views, there are many different interpretations. And what we would like to make a point today is that we don't have all the answers for all of these unknowns ourselves either. And that we think it will be very hard for all companies, including you and Vaimo, to be 100% compliant by 25th of May. And that a lot of companies will find this very expensive and potentially also even unaffordable to be 100% compliant. But despite these unknowns, what we do know is that it's better to do something than to do nothing. And therefore, Vaimo's approach on GDPR is let's apply best practice and show good intent. So you'll hear me repeat this quite a lot today. For us, we want to apply best practice and show good intent towards this topic. We are of the opinion that if Vaimo and our clients can jointly show that we are applying within reason best practice and that we show good intent, that we should be fine. Excuse the pun, it wasn't intended. But as long as we apply this best practice and good intent, we will work our way towards trying to be 100% compliant. And when we see and hear more about how we need to do it, then we'll obviously adapt and adjust. So today we would like to walk you through what we believe is needed to tick all these tick boxes for best practices and good intent, and share some of this on a very high level with you. Okay, so just to summarize this introduction, we've been fortunate to have a team of experts that has dedicated themselves during the last 12 months to work with us on this topic. This topic is contentious. We don't have all the answers. We've got a pretty good understanding of what we need to do. We've got a good understanding of the how, but all of the how is not clear. We definitely don't recommend to sit back and wait, and we recommend to apply best practice and to show good intent. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction. I don't want to assume that everybody knows on this call what is GDPR, so I'll just take a very few minutes to just cover some of the basics and answer what is GDPR. So in a nutshell, the European Union is preparing to roll out a new data privacy law called the General Data Protection Regulation. In short, everyone refers to this as GDPR. And this goes into effect on 25 May 2018. So we've only got a few months left. Then this new law will go into effect. And this new law basically governs how companies may collect and handle the personal data of individuals that's residing in the EU. And therefore, this company impacts everyone who does business with EU residents. So it doesn't really matter if your company is in US or if it's in Australia. If it collects and processes personal data for individuals who are residents of the EU, then you will need to comply with GDPR. Okay. So what is the whole motivation behind GDPR, and why has this been introduced? So basically, the new data protection law aims to provide standardized data protection across Europe and make it easier for EU citizens to understand how the data is being used. A lot of these laws are not new. Most of them has already been part of previous data protection laws, but the GDPR has resulted in some new or extended rights for the individuals. And if we are a little bit black and white, the current regulations to protect EU citizens are out of date. And the reason why they're out of date is that there's been quite a lot of rapid advances in technology during the past 2 decades. And the changes in how data is stored has changed quite a lot, and the regulations hasn't been able to keep up. So this is basically the motivation, and the intention is to try and catch up with the way that the technology has changed and how data is being stored. So basically, to summarize GDPR, it's a set of new laws. It's around personal data, and if you're collecting or handling this personal data of an EU resident, doesn't matter if that data is for a customer, a supplier, or an employee, then you will need to comply with GDPR. Okay, we'll work our way through a little bit what is this compliance today and touch on some of the key areas. But before we do that, let's just look at some terminology so that we're all on the same page. The first one I want to talk a little bit is about personal data. So personal data is basically any information relating to an identified or identifiable individual. So this could be information like a name or a surname or an email address or an IP address or information that's stored in cookies. So it's not only card details or some specific data that we've previously linked to a PCI, but this is any piece of personal information. So only name and surname qualifies as personal data. We will show our data protection agreement and show you a couple of extra other types of personal data. Okay. The next terminology that we want to talk through is the controller. So for today's discussion, let's try and simplify this and say that the controller is our clients who are on the call. So anyone that's on the call, that's our client. The controller is you. This is the company who engage with the data subjects, collects their data, and decides how the data is being processed. Okay. The next definition is a little bit around the processor. And for today's discussion, this is Vaimo. For our clients who are on this call, basically your supplier. And it's also important to note that you can have potentially more than one processor. So Vaimo might be one of several who you've instructed as a controller to process personal data. And then last but not least, the data subjects. Those are for today's discussion, if you are our client, that is your customers or employees or suppliers. So any individual's personal data that is being collected or processed. Okay, so we'll refer to these terminologies quite a lot today. So again, just to summarize, controller, that's our clients. Processor, that's us. Personal data is any data that we store about, say, data subjects that's identified as personal data. Okay. So now that we know on a high level what GDPR is, and we've clarified a few definitions, let's move on to the next section of this webinar, which is the fines. Okay. So today, I don't really want to talk too much about the fines. This is not about scaring tactics or to create fear. And therefore, the intention of today's topic is not to deep dive on the type of fines and how bad or ridiculous the fines might appear to be. Instead, what I want to highlight is that the fines are not only about security. And what do we mean when we say this? So basically, what we've seen and what we hear in the market is that ahead of GDPR taking effect, many companies and businesses are focusing heavily on security breaches. And that seems to be what people link and associate with GDPR is actually the security breaches. Although this is only one aspect of compliance. And what we would like to bring across today is what is more important is that GDPR has around about 39 actionable breaches, of which 2 only relates to security. So there are quite a lot of other elements of compliance that we need to take into consideration. So let's take a look at some of these other elements. And I think this is the parts that is quite challenging around GDPR. And that is that what is important under GDPR, as I said, is that it's not only about security, but that we need to look at how do we collect data, how do we process the data, who do we share it with, and how long do we keep it, and how do we provide information to data subjects. So GDPR is much more focused, and the challenge is around the transparency, the accountability, the systems, the processes, and the provision of information. So we will dig into this a little bit deeper today so that we can understand that it's a lot more than just focusing on security. Okay, but if we take a step back again on the fine side, there are around 39 actionable breaches which could lead to finable offenses. And about half of them are on the high level and half of them on the low level. When we talk about high and low level, again, I don't want to go into too much details here today, but it doesn't really matter if it's high or low. In our view, they are all high. Whether you get a 10 million fine or a 20 million fine, for most of our clients and for Vaimo, this is quite significant and definitely not really a differentiation between high and low. And there was fines in the past, so this is not much of a change. I think the big change is that it's very clear what are the amounts, and the amounts has increased significantly. But from Vaimo's point of view, the big change is that in the past, the fines was all finable offenses that was pointing towards the controller, and that would be our client. But however, with the introduction of GDPR, the processor, which is Vaimo, can also be fined. So if we look at the 39 breaches that is defined as actionable breaches, then Vaimo is going to be held responsible for about 18 out of those 39. So this changes the game a bit, and since Vaimo, with the introduction of GDPR, also now has quite a lot of extra responsibilities, we need to jointly tackle GDPR as a topic with our clients. And this is not a topic only for our clients or only for us. It's something we need to do jointly together. And jointly, we need to try and apply best practice and show good intent to reduce each other's risks in this area. Okay. What you will most probably, for all of those who's registered, we have made available to you a GDPR fine guide. So you should have received this as a separate document, as a PDF. In this PDF, we go into quite a bit of detail, and we've structured the information quite nicely in there. I'll just run you through this for those of you who've not received it. Feel free to ask us for a copy of it. But in this guide, we basically cover a summary of the type of fines and how they are split between high and low. We also explain what should happen if there's a breach and how you need to notify. And we also then differentiate between high and low. But what we've then done is we've nicely laid out obligations of the controller, which would be our clients. And for those obligations, which of those obligations result in low fines or high fines. So it's, in my view, quite nicely presented and easily read and easy to be able to understood. And then we've also prepared in the same document what is Vaimo's obligations and which of the obligations leads for Vaimo's side to a high fine or a low fine. I won't be going into this into detail today, but if you didn't receive a copy of this, feel free to ask us for a copy of this. Okay. So to summarize the fines section, the fines might come across as bad and rough and heavy, and we don't know today how strict they will be implementing the fines. And it's one of the key areas on which further guidance is pending. But most companies can't really afford these type of fines and will be forced to close their doors if they enforce the fines. And we are sure that this is not the intent of GDPR. But anyway, we should jointly tackle this problem and try and make sure that we comply and reduce each other's risks in this area. The next topic that I want to talk a little bit, which is also a bit of a game changer, is claims from data subjects. And to continue a little bit on this thread in the previous slide, that the focus is not so much on security breaches, but heavily weighed towards transparency and accountability. I think the rights of the data subjects highlights this for us quite nicely. And under GDPR, companies must be able to meet requests of data subjects. And if we talk about the rights of data subjects, then it basically means the following things that we have on the screen. So under GDPR, the data subjects, or the individuals that we store data about, they have a right to ask businesses to provide the information about them and copies of the data they hold about the data subject. So they've got a right to be informed and they've got a right to access it. But they can also ask that the data or errors should be corrected. So they've got a right to rectification. And subject to some qualifications, they can also ask for the data to be provided in a format that they can transfer elsewhere. So that would be the right for data portability. And also in some circumstances, they can also ask that the data must be deleted. So they've got a right to erasure. So there are some other rights that the data subjects they have, and that includes also the right to object, and the right to be not to be subject to automated decision making. And some of these rights are not entirely new, but the portability and erasure rights are very new areas for companies to deal with. And today, these type of areas are leading to a lot of questions on, okay, we understand what we need to do, but how do we need to do it? And two areas that are very good examples is the right to erasure and the right to data portability. So, for example, if we look a little bit at the right to erasure, there are many different views on this topic. Some views are that, well, there needs to be a very good reason for the data to be deleted, and some says, no, if I ask for it to be deleted, it should be deleted. So it's not 100% clear how this works today. But we also need to look at some of the challenges with the right to erasure. There are some systems that doesn't make it possible to delete data. So, for example, removing customer information from an invoice in an ERP system. Or if you remove the data from a system, but you still have it in backups, do you need to go and erase it from backups to prevent that if you restore the backup that you restore that data again? So these topics are very wide and very deep, but nevertheless, these are the rights of the data subjects, and we are working our way through how we can address these rights and work our way through with our clients to find solutions for these challenges. Okay. But as I said, some of these rights are not new, and some of them has been in place in the past. But what is interesting is that data subjects can claim compensation for damages they suffer from breached incidents. Again, this is not a change in itself, but the big change is that the data subjects can claim damages not only from the controller, which is you, but they can also now claim damages from the processor. So this is Vaimo, and they can claim this directly if Vaimo has not been fulfilling its obligations under the GDPR. Okay, and what makes this interesting is that the risk of data subjects bringing damage claims against the controller or the processor is probably now greater than ever before. And you might ask, why do we say so? And we feel that is because of the combination of the new and extended rights and the need to provide more complete and clear information. And also just around the publicity around GDPR itself. So we feel that all of these factors will contribute to data subjects most probably lodging complaints and trying to do damage claims more than before. So therefore, it's likely that in the early days of GDPR, we'll see a spike in the number of subject requests to try out these rights, and we'll also most probably see a spike in logged complaints. And this potentially could open up quite a can of worms. To highlight this and why we say so, let's look at a survey that was recently done in the UK. So a survey was done by a company called SAS on about 2,000 consumers in the UK. And this survey revealed quite a bit of interesting statistics. So this survey basically explores the sentiment towards upcoming GDPR changes and how those changes empowers consumers with new rights over how their personal data is handled by organizations. And what we can see from this survey is that nearly half, or to be accurate, about 48% of UK adults plan to act on their new rights when GDPR comes in force on 25th of May. And even more interesting is that about 15% of the adults polled expressed their intention to activate their rights within the first month when GDPR comes in force. So there is consumers welcome GDPR. They are aware of it. They are aware of their rights, or a large percentage of them. And it looks like they will try and see, can I access my information? Can I erase my information? And we can see, according to this poll also, from an interest point of view, that about 64% would be very interested to access the type of information that we store and process. and only about 38% will be interested in data portability, meaning to be able to take the data that you have about them and take it out of the system and being able to use it in another system. Okay. So in the information that we'll share with you afterwards, we'll share also with you the URL for the study. So if you want to go and read up a little bit about it and get more information about it, we'll also share that link with you. Okay. So what should we expect? I think what we've just shown a little bit about the data subject's rights and them being very aware and welcoming the GDPR changes. I think this amplifies and increases the risks for regulators to come and knock on our doors. And I think this basically is also showing us that we shouldn't sit back and wait. We should prepare ourselves and try, again, I'm using these terms, apply best practice and show good intent jointly to reduce each other's risks in these areas. So now that we're done with the fines, let's get a little bit more into some of the practical parts. We have been looking at various ways ourselves how to work through GDPR, and the ICO, the Information Commission Office, it's a UK authority, has put together quite an easy to use and understand 12-step guide to help you and us focus on some of the important parts of GDPR. So I'll quickly jump out from here and open up this guide for you. We'll also share this URL with you afterwards and this guide. But according to this guide, it highlights 12 points for us. And in this guide, it also digs a little bit deeper into these 12 points and helps us to focus on what is important right now. So I'll obviously won't be able to go through all of this today step by step, simply because of the amount of time that we have available. But I will touch on one or two of these areas just to show you a little bit how they are guiding us. And then obviously you can in your own time work your way through this 12-step guide. So if we take the first point that they are raising here, which is awareness, the first step from this guide is basically that you should make sure that decision makers in your company and key people in the organization are aware that the law is changing. As we earlier pointed out, we don't think awareness is the problem. So awareness is one thing, but more importantly, that the key decision makers will need to appreciate the impact this is likely to have on their company. I think a lot of us underestimate the changes that need to take place. And hopefully, from what you've seen and heard so far, and all the rights of the data subjects, it becomes clear that there's quite a lot of work that needs to take place, and implementing all the changes around GDPR could have a significant resource impact on your company. Of course, this depends on the size and the complexity of your company. But you might find compliance to be difficult and expensive, so don't leave this too late, and especially if you leave it to the last minute. They and we encourage awareness, which is something that we're doing as part of today, is obviously creating awareness as well. But don't underestimate the amount of work, and prepare for the effort that it might take. Okay, so the second thing that they are pointing out as a step to take is around the information you hold. This is quite a, I would say, quite a straightforward step to understand, but yet there are so many that hasn't done this, and most probably one of the easier steps to start with. And basically what they are encouraging you to do is to go and document what personal data you hold, where this data came from, and who you are sharing it with. So a very simple request. Document the type of data that you hold, where did you get it, and who are you sharing it with. So this might result, when you start, you think this is quite straightforward, and then eventually you realize, oh goodness, this is an audit, and it has to be done across the whole organization or quite in detail with some specific business areas. But the main reason why you need to do this type of documentation is that GDPR requires you to maintain records of the processing activities. And again, we might ask why. Why do they need us to maintain these records? And one good example here is, again, back to the rights of the data subjects, is that you might have inaccurate personal data of someone on file, and you might have shared this with another organization. And if these data subjects request that you fix it, correct it, then you will need to be able to understand who did you share this data with and notify them of these fixes and changes, and the data in the systems that has been shared should also then be fixed and corrected. Okay, so doing this will also help you to comply with GDPR's accountability principle, which basically requires organizations to be able to show how they comply with data protection principles. So this can be quite an exercise and can quite be difficult for some companies. But if you're not sure how to go about documenting this information that you hold, we are able to help you with this exercise. We offer this information audit as a very separate service that we can come and help you and work your way through this process of documenting the information that you hold. So feel free to reach out to us if you need help on this specific area. Okay, so I will maybe touch on one more topic as an example, and then I'll leave the rest for you to go and read through. And the next example is that they're recommending is to go and look at your to communicate your privacy policy. It's all around how you communicate privacy information. And the recommendation here is basically to go and review your current privacy notices and put a plan in place for making any necessary changes in time for GDPR implementation. And why you need to do this is when you collect personal data, you currently have to give people certain types of information. So this is nothing new. You're doing it today. And this is usually done through a privacy notice. But under GDPR, there are quite a couple of things that has changed with the privacy notice. And you will need to, for example, explain your lawful basis for processing the data. You'll need to explain your data retention period. So how long will you keep this data? And you also will need to make it clear to the individuals that they have a right to complain to the ICO if they think there's a problem with the way that you're handling the data. And our recommendation here with this privacy policy is basically to keep things simple. GDPR requires us that the information is concise, easy to understand, and that we use a very clear language. And we'll also share with you this link, which is a guide on how to draw up your privacy notice and how to be transparent and the type of information that needs to be in there. But we've also come across quite an interesting little tool, which is a free privacy policy generator. If you want to give it a go, we'll also share this link with you. And this privacy policy generator is also being created around GDPR. So we will be sharing all of these links and these tools with you. And again, if you are struggling with this and you need some help, this is also a service that we can offer, is to work with you through the privacy policy and help you to make the necessary changes that's needed to the privacy policy. Okay, so that's a 12-step guide. We really recommend that you work your way through it and start understanding how you are positioned to comply with GDPR. And in addition to this 12-step guide, we also recommend you to look at what is called a self-assessment. Again, it's a URL that we will share with you. And according to this self-assessment tool, if I just go a step back, this self-assessment tool helps data controllers, which is our clients who are on this call today, and then also data processors, companies like us, to go through a set of questions and to then give a report on how ready you are for GDPR. So a question might be, your business has conducted an information audit to map data flows, not yet, partially, successfully implemented. And if you don't understand the question or what it is that you had to do, you can obviously get more information about what it is that they expect you to do. This is quite a good self-assessment tool. It gives you quite a good feeling of where you are, and so we also recommend that you try and work your way through this self-assessment tool. Okay, so basically this was the first half of the talk for today. It was very much generic, a little bit about what is GDPR, what are the type of things that has been introduced that's challenging, like the rights of data subjects, and sharing with you a few tools that you can go and look at to work your way through this. The next half of the webinar today is a little bit dealing about the specific breaches relevant to Vaimo and the things that Vaimo and our clients need to do together in the short term, and that we need to get moving with quite soon. So to get us into that, I would like to go through just three breaches on a very high level, so that we can understand that this is something that we need to act on and that we need to work with it jointly. It's not a one-sided affair. The first one is Article 28, and basically what this article is saying is that a controller, which is our clients, should use a processor, which is Vaimo in this case, which provides sufficient guarantees to implement appropriate and technical organizational measures to ensure the protection of the rights of the data subjects. So that's quite a mouthful, but basically you as our client need to work with someone who guarantees that they have implemented appropriate measures to protect the data. And this guarantee and obligations needs to be in writing. So this is typically in the form of a data processing agreement. And if we don't have this in place between us, then there is a breach, and the fine is applicable to both the controller you and to Vaimo. So this is the first thing we need to take note of. The second thing is that, and this is only applicable to Vaimo. It says both controller and processor, but this is a mistake. It's only related to Vaimo. But basically what this article is saying to us is that we are not allowed to process your customer's data without the express permission. So we need to get permission from you as our client, as a controller, to process the data. And this is also, again, typically done with a data processing agreement. We have consent from most of our clients to process data today. Under GDPR, we need to make sure we have it, and then we also need to have it in a way that is GDPR compliant. So our old data processing agreements that we have with our clients is most probably not relevant and will need to be updated. Okay. So, and then the last one is quite interesting. Failure to implement an appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security appropriate to the risk. So encryption, pseudonymization, and business continuity, they highlight as some examples. But in this article, in this section, GDPR is quite specific, although they still not say exactly how, but they point out that business must implement state-of-the-art technologies relative to the risk. And this is also a breach or a fine that is applicable to both Vaimo and our clients. And this one has caused us to do quite a bit of work on our side to revisit all our technical and organizational measures. And this is what's basically the next topic, is to explain to you a little bit the net effect of this type of GDPR breaches. So where does this leave us is basically the big question. And if we look at the net effect, it might sound quite simple, but this is how we see it today. So the net effect is, as a result of GDPR, is that in addition to those 12 steps that you need to go and take a look at, we need to get a new data processing agreement in place between us and our clients. We have prepared this as an agreement for all of our clients. And even if I must admit myself, this is a pretty good agreement and a very good base. And you might find it interesting to take a look at that, and also to potentially look at that as a base for using with your other processors. But we will share that with you and obviously try to work our way through all our clients to get this new data processing agreement in place. And once we've got the data processing agreement in place, we will need to go and make quite a lot of security changes to the environment where your systems are being hosted and managed. And in addition to this, we will need to make some changes to your Magento site. We will introduce some new features and functions. And then also we'll need to make some front-end changes, for example, update the privacy policy. But I will go into a little bit more detail on this topic because this is where all the big changes happens and where we need to jointly work together. So just to start out, I'm trying to depict this a little bit graphically, and I appreciate that not all the elements that I'm going to show you now will be 100% correct, but just to be able to display it graphically, I hope it gives you a good sense of where and how the pieces of the puzzle will fit together. Okay, so we see the changes basically in two areas. Changes will be in Vaimo's environment and then to the Magento application. So the very first change that we will be doing and that we've been doing for quite some time is changes to our security policy. So there's a lot of changes that has been happening in the background, and some of these changes are, for example, re-implementing our control access through a centralized access tool to make sure that we only give access on a least privilege basis, so only access for people to things that they really need. So that was quite a big program change inside our organization. We also updated and improved our incident management program, and all of these type of changes can be found in our security policy. Okay, so that's the first change. Then the second change is that we will be introducing what we call a web application firewall to all of our clients. The web application firewall will introduce a bit of extra security to the environment, and we will introduce this with a tool called Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is a CDN application, so a content delivery network. And what Cloudflare primarily does, it's actually helping to speed up the site because it distributes content over many servers across the world. But because of Cloudflare's technology, they also provide a really good solution for a web application firewall where we can work with the rule sets that's specifically fine-tuned for Magento applications. And then in addition to getting the WAF and the content delivery network, we also will get additional benefits of a DDoS protection, so denial of service attack, and we'll also get SSL certificates for our clients included with introducing this. So that is a great addition to the stack that we'll be introducing to all clients. In addition to the web application firewall, we'll also be adding an intrusion detection system for all our clients. We'll be using Snort as the intrusion detection system. And basically what this will be doing is monitoring the network for any malicious activity. In addition to adding an intrusion detection system, we'll also be adding a vulnerability scanning system. And here we will just be scanning the environment for security vulnerabilities. And on top of this, we will also be adding a file integrity monitoring system, which will monitor basically files and logs and alert if these files and logs was changed without it, if it shouldn't have changed. And then in addition to all of these systems, the last piece of the puzzle when it comes to systems that we will be adding is a log manager system. And this log manager will collect all the important data and alerts from different systems and from different tools. And in this log manager system, we'll be able to then analyze all this data and report on this data back to our clients and to whoever needs information about potential security breaches. So the first part of all the changes is heavily focused on security, so a lot of extra tools, quite a bit of extra benefits to us and our clients not only securing the site, but also making the site faster. But in addition to this, we will also add some data encryption. And this will be some data encryption at rest, which is specifically stated as a GDPR requirement. And in addition to this, we will add a few extensions to Magento. So one of them is a password manager. And the reason why we will add a password manager is that we've noticed through surveys and reading up quite a lot about breaches, is that most of the breaches occur because of weak password management. These are cases where you've got Bob and Bob123 as the password, or Sue and Sue123. And it's quite easy to crack these username and passwords and then get access to the administrative parts of the system. And so we will no longer be relying on end users to make sure that those passwords are strong and or that they are regularly changed. We will introduce a password manager program for the Magento application that will help us to reduce the risk there. And then we'll also be deploying a specific GDPR module, which I will go into a bit more detail on the next slide. And then last but not least, we will also need to work with you on making some specific front-end changes to, for example, the privacy policy. Okay. So that's quite a mouthful, quite a lot. As I said, it's we only have an hour and there's quite a lot that we want to share with you. But hopefully you can see that there is quite a lot of work that we need to do together with you during the coming months. All of these systems and changes need to be installed and delivered and tested and deployed. So we need to get started with this. And we are obviously hoping that you are as excited about us, about all the potential benefits around this, but obviously there is quite a lot of work that lies ahead. You might be asking a little bit more about this GDPR module, and we've been working with some of our existing clients to look into the challenges and the pains of GDPR. And a lot of this lies with the rights of the data subjects. And so we are helping our clients with a extension that specifically reduces the effort on complying in this area. And we'll be rolling out a module to our clients that basically consists out of three main components. The first one is a central engine for tracking where customer data resides. So basically what this means is there will be an engine that tracks where customer data is exported to so that we can report where customer data went. So any data that's inside the applications that we use for processing, that tool will basically track the customer data, and whenever it's exported, we will know where it has been exported to. So customer data may also only be kept for a certain time. So this module will track when customer data was inserted, when it was last interacted with, and then alert whoever's responsible for this that this customer data became old, and due to inactivity that this customer data now needs to be removed. So this tool will help us with that as well. And this engine will also track requests from customers. So if a data subject asks for the right to be forgotten or have their data being exported, then this tool will help to track that requests. And for all such events, the engine will also track if we have actually actioned this request, if we've removed the data and or if we've exported the data in a format that they needed it. Okay. Then we'll also improve opt-in handling quite a bit. Under GDPR, we can no longer just assume that the customer has accepted. So privacy policies we'll need to present them separately from other terms and conditions, and end users will need to actively accept them. So this change that we'll be doing will help to support that. So users can also change their mind later on, and then we'll add features that will allow them to go and change this in the My Account. And this module will also help to track the specific privacy policy version, so that we have an audit trail on which privacy policy the data subject accepted and what version, so that we have a trail on that. Okay, and then the last part of this extension is obviously we will now be having the engine that logs and tracks all of these requests, but the last part of it is to be able to support the deletion or the export of the customer data in a portable format. So if you've been scratching your head around how are we going to solve this, and that it's quite a process, we believe that with this module we'll be helping to solve quite a bit of the data subjects' rights and address a key part of it with this extension. Okay. So in summary, we need to sign the data processing agreement between us. We need to make all the necessary changes on the security side. We will need to install some extensions. We will need to make some front-end changes. And the tough thing is that all of this needs to take place between now and 25th of May 2008. So there's quite a lot of work that lies ahead. And if we look at a high-level time line, we can see that we have marked out a few key markers in this timeline that we want to share with you. So the first one is the paperwork. So we'll be aiming to work our way through the paperwork with our clients, with you, between now and the end of the month. So clients who has completed the paperwork between now and the end of the month will be part of what we call an early bird discount offer. And these clients will also be prioritized in the queue for getting all the changes done by May. So the first step is to do the paperwork. Someone from our side will be in touch with you during the next week or two to set up an appointment and walk you through the type of costs involved in making these changes and the data, presenting you with the data processing agreement, and actively try and get the paperwork in place before the end of the month. And then during March and April, we'll be rolling out all the security and system changes that we will communicate with you. And during February and March, we will finalize the building and the testing of the extensions that we've mentioned in this presentation. And then during April and May, we'll install and deploy the extensions, and we'll make the necessary front-end changes that's needed for GDPR. So that's basically on a very high level the timeline that we're looking at. It's going to be very tight and tough. And as I said, the key here is to try and work on a method where we have most of the customers coming in on the same time and work through a process. So therefore, the clients that have signed up by 28th of Feb, they will get prioritized in this process. Okay. So, and you might be asking, what's the next steps? A key account manager from Vaimo's side will be in contact with you during the next 1 or 2 weeks to talk through what we've talked about today, to hold your hand with the data processing agreement, and to support you with understanding the type of costs that's involved. We have gone and evaluated each and every client of ours system and made a high-level prognosis of the effort that it will take to from a cost point of view to get these changes made. So we are ready to discuss this with every client on an individual basis. So we'll be prioritizing these steps during the coming weeks. And then we encourage you to, in the background, go through the 12-step guide and do the self-assessment. And then also, in addition, if you need any assistance with this, we do provide services to help you. So feel free to reach out to us. We have an email address called gdpr@vaimo.com. If you need any help or any further information on this, I'll share with you the email address. And just to highlight some of these services, if you need help with GDPR, there is a GDPR assessment report that we can help you to create, where we provide a chart, and we report on our key recommendations and highlights of the things that you need to focus on if you need help with that. Also, if you need help with the audit of the information flow, then we can provide you with a service where we help you to do the data flow audit mapping, and provide you with that key journeys and how the data is flowing. And we can also help you with a general GDPR compliance review. If you've done stage 1 and stage 2 with us, then we can help you with stage 3, and also help with just generic consulting and assistance with documentation as an ad hoc service. Okay. So now we get towards the end of today's webinar. We will unfortunately not have time to take questions from individuals on today's call, but what we've been doing is we've been collecting all the questions that you've sent through so far, and we've made a page available called commerce.vaimo.com FAQ GDPR, and we'll share this link with you. And basically this page has all the questions that we've collected so far and answers for it. And what we encourage you to do is, if you have any questions on today's webinar or more general questions around GDPR, is to send us those questions to gdpr@vaimo.com. If they are generic and of such a nature that we should share with everyone else, we will then obviously add this to this website. So continuously go and look at that website for new information or that link. There is a password to get through. It's called GDPR webinar. And feel free to send questions there, and we'll obviously help to try and answer them. Okay, so I want to thank you again for your participation today. As I said, there was a lot to get through, and I've been speaking really fast to try and get through this within 1 hour. We've just made it, and hopefully there was a few pieces of information in there that's insightful for you, and quite a lot for us to do together. And we are there to support you through this, and feel free to push on our button if there is any areas that you feel we can help you with in this area. And as I said, we will reach out to you ourselves during the next 1 or 2 weeks and try and set up appointments to work our way through the steps that we need to jointly do together. Okay. Thank you, and good luck with your GDPR journey.